have to put that slide up there to remind myself who I am. Now, being an illustrator, I can't help but follow a brief, and when I knew the talk was called Here, I just thought we'd just for a few minutes just bear with me, just explore where here really is, because I think we don't really think about it that much. We know we're here on our beautiful planet, and we know we're a little dot right now, National Geographical Society right there. But I found some pictures recently in a book by Ken Robinson that I think really help explain or just kind of show a different perspective on where here, meaning planet Earth, really is. And they were kind of black and white grainy drawings, so I remade them. But basically what they did to show perspective was to take distance out of the equation and just, it has to be a graphic designer that did this originally, I reckon, but just to basically place the planets and stars like little objects on a table, and suddenly you got a much better idea of where here really is. So a minute ago, Earth was looking quite impressive, and now it's like kind of, you know, we're being dwarfed by Jupiter and Saturn. But we forget how big our sun is. My God, it's like, I didn't realize we were like a little poppy seed next to the sun, because we don't tend to think of it that way. And just when you think the sun's looking impressive, the sun is now a pea, and we've actually become invisible at this scale. Arcturus is actually one of the fourth brightest stars in our, if you look up in a bright night, a kind of clear sky, if you follow the Big Dipper, that's Arcturus. And it's a really, really big star, but not as big as these two. Now, we're talking about some of the stars in our known universe, and I love that term, the known universe, because that means there's a lot unknown. There's actually a much bigger star than Antares, but I thought we'd stop there, actually. Because we are here. My kids were looking at my slideshow as I was preparing it, going, and saw this. This is a view of the Hubble telescope took this view, and it's of distant galaxies. These are not even planets, these are galaxies. And they're going, where are we in there? And I said, we are there, but we're kind of unimaginable. And, well, where's our Milky Way? It's like, no, you don't understand. We're unimaginable at this scale. We are there, and I think it can be quite overwhelming sometimes. I mean, if that hasn't given you a sense of perspective, I don't know what does. And it almost makes you think, well, I might as well just leave now. Why do I even get out of bed in the morning? It's like, oh my God. But there is something that is as incredible as this, that is as amazing as this, and that is human imagination and human beings. And if you ever pop around to the Science Museum, there's a fantastic film on the Hubble telescope, which is, if you thought the film Gravity was good, go and see the real thing. And I actually wept through it, because I suddenly felt very alone as a human being, and thought, oh my God, even if there is other life, it's so far away. And it's very, very humbling. And it made me think how special we are, and how special human beings are. And there's one thing we do that's really quite comparable, as I said, to this vast universe, and that is, we do something that no other animal does on the planet. We do something no other animal even thinks about, and that is we make art. And we make art not because we need to. We don't need to do it to survive. We do it, I think, to understand ourselves better and to understand ourselves in this universe. And I think it's a very, very, very special thing, and I feel very privileged to be able to make art. And I'm sure this is a very creative audience. We make art, and we are very special. But back down to earth with a bump, I'm afraid. There's some interesting statistics that I read a few years ago. Every year, Google releases Google Analytics on the most popular search words on the internet. We kind of know what at least two of those are going to be. But they also do different categories of, you know, and one of them is how-to. What's the most commonly searched how-to? And in 2012 in the UK, the most commonly searched how-to wasn't how to get on the X Factor. It wasn't how to lose weight. it was, well, not how to bake a cake. I mean, there's so many things you could think, but it was actually how to draw. And I mean, I find that very, very surprising, but I also find it very optimistic. I mean, just to put it in some kind of perspective, the Danish how-to search that year was how to kiss, and the Turkish how-to was how to permanently remove Facebook. So, but we wanted to draw. We wanted to draw, and that's an incredible thing, you know, considering we don't need to learn how to draw, actually. Human beings, it's the first thing we do. We don't need to learn how to draw like reading or writing. We draw instinctively. We draw for pleasure. We draw to express ourselves. We go into our own little world, and it's a really, really amazing thing to do. There's no right or wrong way to draw at that age. The only thing that's a little bit sad is that out of a nursery class of, say, 30 kids, by the time they get to the end of primary school, 25 of those kids will have given up drawing for themselves. And many will develop a fear of drawing. And many will just never draw again, and they'll say, I'm rubbish at drawing. And I'm going to go into that later, why I think that might happen. But from that great optimism of that we all want to draw and we all draw, something does go wrong. Now, I didn't give up drawing, and that's what I do. I mean, what I do is a form of drawing. Every day I draw, and I make my living from drawing, and I have done for the last 25 years. And I'm going to show you a very, very quick snapshot. It's really a snapshot, because I don't really want to go through all my work here, because you can go on the internet and see work. I'd rather talk about why I make work. But I make work for everyone. I mean, I'm a commercial artist. Whoever asks me to make work, if I like the idea, I'll make work for them. From newspapers to restaurants to books. I do make pictures. Recently I've been doing so much hand lettering that I forget that I do actually make pictures. I do hand lettering for everyone, from magazines to stamps to big multinational companies, very important for paying your rent, to more big multinational companies, animations for phones, for museums. And in the last few years, I've actually been making and writing books about art. Originally it was thought of as for children, but I truly believe art is ageless and that art activities are ageless. So I knew quite early on that these books were from 5 to 95, and they have been taken up by all different age groups. And these books were really a bit like art school in a book. Everything I'd learned about how to draw or how to make stuff, I tried to put in these books. I showed a little bit of artists. I showed the importance of play. But what was more interesting about these books is that they're kind of incomplete without participation of the person who picks it up. And that's what I quite liked about them. It's the half of the book's me and the half is whoever fills it in. And over the years, people have been doing this particular activity, and I've amassed hundreds of these drawings of the Mona Lisa. And some of them are it's interesting we make art relevant to our time, so there's so many Lady Gagas and quite a lot. But my favorite one is a beer-drinking Mona Lisa, because she's obviously of our time. But how quickly can you make Mona ugly? I mean, it's not hard, is it? Oh my God. It's like just one little move to the left and it's gone. I also made a book on fingerprint art, which was a kind of follow-up to that book. And the fingerprint is the oldest and most universal way of mark making. Very simple. And I think when I was a student and when I first left college, I'd never have dared do something like this because I wouldn't have thought it was cool enough. And the great thing about working for a long time is I don't care about being cool anymore. And if I want to do cute, I'll do cute. But it took me a long time to get there and to be confident enough to do that. But I love the fingerprints. And I think I made a whole book on what you can do with fingerprints and just used it like an exercise. Well, how far can you take it? And I'm now taking it much further into products. In fact, it's going into lots of things. You'll be buying a mug, you'll have a pencil with those fingerprints on soon. And those books are in many different languages now. I've lost count, I think about 21 languages. Maybe the last one was Armenian. So it proves that people do, actually, even if they've given up drawing, they do want to draw. A few years ago, maybe about 3 years ago, I was asked to do a lecture. I was telling Christoph about it today. It was about, can you tell us about your creative process? You know, exactly what you do, how you do, why you do it in 10 minutes. And it was quite a daunting task, and it was a very illustrious audience I was talking to. I was very nervous, so I worked really hard at this, and I thought, oh my God, I've really got to work. What on earth do I do? It's not something I think you think about unless someone forces you to do a project on it. I mean, this is where I work, and I work on this front desk, which I call my play desk, where I make stuff. And on a computer, I compile everything together in Photoshop and send it all by WeTransfer, so thank you, WeTransfer. And I just want my internet connection to be as fast as that, because I spend a lot of time watching that little wheel go around. So internet connection is so slow. But there's a few things I learned from observing my creative process that I'd like to share with you, because I think they're kind of helpful for everyone. The first thing I thought I'd do is like, well, what do I do? Oh my God, I'll just put some cameras up and that'll give me all the answers of how I make my stuff, because I have no idea. I go in, I do a job, I start it. So I started filming what I did. And I mean, I learned a little bit about what I do by filming. I learned watching someone on a computer is really boring. And I don't move much on that computer. And also, but on the other desks, that play desk, because I tend to work on different projects all the time, it really was an interesting desk, I think, because it kind of showed what I was doing from week to week. And I started just photographing the desk because there were like little memories of those jobs I did. And I found they were just much more interesting. Even though I'm sure what I was doing on the computer was really interesting, you just can't see it. It's like trying to see in someone's head. But it kind of looks like I'm having fun on those desks, I think. I mean, it's when people do walk in and sometimes think it's like a kindergarten. But there's, it's like, well, that is what I do. And the one thing that I think I learned, the major thing I learned from this, from watching myself and thinking about how I make work and why I make work, is I realized that I enjoy the process of making art as much as the final outcome. And that might not seem such a great big revelation, but actually I think it's really key. It's like, that's where I enjoy myself most, is that making stuff, playing stuff. And the final outcome's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's really important to enjoy that journey of making stuff. And it got me back to thinking, why did those kids give up drawing, actually? The ones that really loved it. Because I'm kind of doing that play stuff. I never gave up that playful enjoyment stuff. And I think one of the main problems is in Western teaching, the way we teach art in the West, is that by the age of 9 or 10, we're kind of moving kids towards realism, academic drawing. And that's great. That's the route I went down, and I learned a lot from that. But for many kids, it's too difficult. And they just can't make that transition into perspective and into drawing the human figure or drawing something realistically. And I just think what would be great is if you just turned the whole education thing upside down and said, okay, it's great to teach academic drawing. And a lot of you must all be fairly good at drawing because you're in an artist, we're in a creative audience here. But why not actually reward the kids that do the expressive drawing? And why not encourage it and say, you can do that kind of drawing as well. It's just as valid. And you have to reward it and mark it in the same kind of criteria, otherwise people, it wouldn't work. But you'd have to say the person that draws a great life drawing, you mark them really well. But the kid that's just drawn something that's out of this world from their head, then you mark that really well too. And maybe what might happen is maybe not so many people would give up drawing, because that would be something we would encourage. There's an author called Linda Barry who said something I think is really poignant about that. And she said that for kids, a piece of paper is a place for something to happen. And she said, and for adults, it's a thing. And I think that's what happens, is somewhere along the line we get fixated on this thing that proves, that we're good at something, and we just miss out that whole journey. And I think that's why I think when I was talking about that process, I think that is what's really important. Now, the other thing I noticed when I was trying to what I do, why I do it, is I am obsessed by time. And I think we're all obsessed by time. Technology's made us feel like we're doing lots of things faster, and to a certain extent we are. I am very, very good at multitasking. I'm pretty fast in Photoshop. I've got a fast computer. It's never fast enough. It's just never fast enough. And either I'm getting quicker, or I'm getting more impatient, or I want things to happen very quickly. But I just find it's never fast enough. And I think that's interesting, that perception of time, because we in the West, again, think of time as very linear. It's like A to B, but born, dead. And I think in other cultures it's cyclical, which is a much healthier way to think of time. But it is interesting the way we've managed to cut up time into shorter and shorter segments. Because time is a relatively new thing. It's only with the invention of the railways that time became important. Because before that, there could be a 20-minute discrepancy between the time in Oxford and London. And it didn't really matter then when you were on a horse and cart, because no one really noticed. But as soon as you brought the railways in, it's like, oh my God, it's like there's a difference. So Greenwich Mean Time changed that, where time became a constant thing. But I think there's something interesting about the way we view time. And the thing I noticed most of all was when I'm on my play desk, that time changes. And I don't multitask as much on this desk. Because when I'm on this desk, I tend to be doing one thing at a time. And when I'm painting little dots, little red dots, I can't check my email at the same time. I can't check Facebook, I can't check the weather, I can't write an email. I mean, I can only do that. And I think maybe for one part of the day, that's not a bad thing to do, is just focus on one thing at a time. I think it's very good for us. And I'm slightly addicted I get quite addicted on my computer, and I can't get off it, but time goes very fast, but it doesn't necessarily always feel in a very, very positive way. But here, I lose time in a really beautiful way. And I do recommend just getting some paint and paint some dots. And it was nice to see Mirka's studio where they're drawing, actually. Another thing I noticed is I never used to sit down when I used to work. I didn't have a computer when I left college, and all my work was done standing up. And the only time I sat down was to rest, or be on the telephone, or relax. And so I still have a mental conflict with sitting down and working. And I'm not saying that's right for everyone, because everyone can't stand up and work, or sometimes I work on the floor. But I don't think sitting down, I think we're sitting down too much. We're sitting down all day sometimes. And I'm just wondering if it just makes you a bit inert, that I'm not as alert when I'm sitting down. And when I'm moving and standing up, I feel much more in tune with what I'm creating, and it's much more fluid. And I do recommend just standing up a few times a day, walking around. It's that thing of just very hard to get off screen and really just go for a walk, go and see an exhibition. You sometimes feel like you're working very hard. I've worked 8 hours sitting in front of this screen. Have you really worked that hard, actually? And would you have been better off taking an hour and a half out and coming back to your screen and brought something with it? Would you be better off going on your play desk and cutting up some paper? My latest project, which should be out soon, is another book on making art. But this is slightly different, and I think I brought all that learning that I'd taken about what I do, how I do it, into this book. And I thought, well, where does some of my inspiration come from? And they always say that artists look at other artists, and we do. And Picasso said, that famous quote of good artists copy and great artists steal. And I don't really agree with that, actually. I think that's just a good excuse for copying. But I think we do look at artists, and I think in this book, I've put 18 artists together that I have looked at, and I try to share there what I've learned from them. So some of the artists are quite well known, like Andy Warhol. And I think by looking at artists, it's like putting their shoes on for a day rather than copying them. It's like, well, what were they thinking about when they made that artwork? Or how did they make that artwork? How did Andy Warhol do those lovely drawings? And you may or may not know that he did lots of ink blot drawings, and you may have done this as a kid again, but this is a really nice thing, an easy thing to do. And just by copying that line, even just for a day, and learning how to do it, then you kind of might change your own line. You might change the way you draw your line. It might just develop it in a different way. But also, I think when you go to an exhibition and you see an Andy Warhol line drawing, you kind of know how that's done. It's so easy. It's just a bit of ink blot drawing. You can kind of appreciate it, because as soon as we have that knowledge or that information about how something's been done, I think it enhances our perspective of it. And Hannah Hawke there's been a big retrospective of her work, but when I was putting this book together last year, I don't think she was as well known as, say, Max Ernst, but her work I've always loved because it's slightly sinister. And I don't really do much collage, but I thought, get out of your comfort zone. I like the end result of her work, but I never really do much collage, but it was just great for a few days to have lots of pieces of magazines on my desk and cutting them up and being very playful and putting things together. And I think that I'm not suddenly going to turn into a collage artist, but it might change the way I draw afterwards. So some of the artists are well known, and some are not so well known in this country anyway. And this is an Indian tribal artist called Mache, whose work is absolutely phenomenal, I think. And I really wanted to show his work. And he's someone who, at the age of 7, lost his mother and didn't communicate for years. And the only way he communicated was by drawing pictures in the dust and the ground to show the power of the picture and communication. But in this culture, they teach art very differently. And in Warli tribal art, they work with triangle, circle, and square. And you think those are very narrow parameters of what you can work with. But what's incredible is how much you can get out of those restrictions and what you can actually do with those restrictions. And there's no one caring there about whether it's realistic or not. It's formalistic in a sense, but within that, there's so much room for personal expression. Chulita's another artist who I really love, and was quite hard to show how to be influenced by someone like Chulita, who really deals with negative and positive space in these huge, massive sculptures that he does. And I really wanted to play with this negative, positive space, and the easiest way I could imagine showing that was literally just to get bits of black paper and white paper and cut them up and play with them on a desk. And so you're physically doing it. I don't think you can do it any other way. You need to physically see it and physically do it. And only by, I think it's a very valuable exercise to do things, as I said, with your hands. And the last artist I'm going to show is Philip Guston, another one of my favorites. And I read a quote by him just by coincidence, which said, "I'm not interested in painting, I'm not interested in making a picture, then what the hell am I interested in?" And he said, "I must be interested in this process." And he's a very interesting artist, that he paints what he likes, and he was painting kind of cartoony, weird little pictures at the time when in America everyone was painting these huge, big, abstract expressionist paintings. And he stuck to his guns and painted exactly what he liked. And he also says something crazy like, "Destruction of paintings is crucial to me." Such a negative thing to say about something so positive, but I think very, very very encouraging, because it's back to that thing of not focusing on the final thing. He's enjoying the journey of making the thing. And I turned that into an exercise of destroying drawings, where I'm always saying to my kids, if they ruin something, they're ready to rip it up straight away, or this is no good. It's like, no, we can save it, just paint over it, start again, turn it into something else. And that's exactly what he does. There's something nice about working on something that has a history, and it takes that fear away of the blank piece of paper. So I think those were things that I've learned that I think are very important. And I think it's valuable for everyone to study their own creative process. As children, we draw freely and we don't question why we draw. And I think adults need to really relearn that there's no right or wrong way to draw. And we should just try and enjoy the process of making that artwork as much as the outcome. We should also just try and do one thing at a time sometimes. I think you can get a lot more done, and we should sit down a lot less. And if you do that, I think we'll be happier. That's the end of my talk.